Humans wielding war-bred hounds tore into the surprised alien lines, gnashing teeth and flashing bayonets, ripping the Voth apart in a desperate counterattack to save New Columbus. Ralph Clark charged forward, pulse rifle firing into the fray, his massive genetically enhanced war dog Max leaping ahead to crush their insectoid foes in slavering jaws. The stench of ozone, burning flesh, and spilled blood filled the scorched city ruins. Rubble-strewn streets flashed with plasma fire and grenade blasts, a once thriving human colony, now a charred war zone. Just months ago, the technologically advanced Voth had struck in a surprise attack, nuking cities from orbit and slaughtering millions before the United Earth Alliance could react. The UEA sent its best to hold the line. Soldiers like Ralph and the Omega Squad, armed with the best in weapons and biotech. Soldiers rallied, ships mustered, the ragtag human forces preparing a desperate defense against a superior foe. Every man and woman steeled themselves to fight and die so the refugee ships could escape. They were the only thing standing between their families and Voth death camps. Sudden movement. Max's growl was all the warning Ralph needed. He dove behind a shattered wall as plasma scorched overhead. Peeking out, Ralph spotted the problem. A Voth kill team stalking forward, led by a scarred monster he recognized all too well. Commander Niran, the butcher of Kepler 9, had come to New Columbus to finish the slaughter personally. Checking his ammo and tightening his grip, Ralph prepared to do the impossible. He would stop Niran and complete the mission, or die trying. Max bared his fangs, ready to die alongside his master. No matter the cost, they would hold the line. Ralph crept through the rubble-strewn streets, pulse rifle at the ready. Max padded silently at his side, ears perked for any sign of danger. They had to be careful. Niran and his kill team were deadly adversaries. One wrong move could spell the end. A flicker of movement caught Ralph's eye. He motioned Max to halt, peering around a crumbled wall. There. Niran and the Voth squad advancing cautiously towards what looked like an old research building. The structure had partially collapsed, but still stood defiantly amidst the ruins. Suddenly an eerie, high-pitched whine pierced the air. Ralph froze. He knew that sound. Voth sonic scanners. They were sweeping for survivors. Max let out a pained whimper, his genetically enhanced hearing overwhelmed by the debilitating noise. Ralph's heart raced. He had to act fast. Reaching into his pack, he pulled out the specially designed headphones. With gentle hands, he slipped them over Max's ears. The warhound's whimpers ceased immediately as blessed silence enveloped him. Max looked up at Ralph, eyes filled with gratitude and renewed determination. They had to press on. Ralph needed to find out what Niran was after in that research facility. Sticking to the shadows, they drew closer, Ralph's grip tightening on his rifle. As they approached, Ralph spotted a flicker of movement. His stomach clenched. Survivors! Huddled together in a makeshift shelter were a ragged group of humans. Men, women, children, their faces gaunt and haunted. Among them, Ralph recognized a familiar figure, Dr. Lena Sorensen, the brilliant xenobiologist who had been studying the Voth. What was she doing here? Ralph watched in mounting horror as Niran and his warriors descended upon the shelter like hungry wolves. They dragged the survivors out one by one, Voth pulse rifles trained on terrified faces. Niran strode forward, his eyes fixed on Dr. Sorensen. He barked something in the Voth tongue, gesturing towards the research facility. It hit Ralph like a punch to the gut. Dr. Sorensen had information the Voth wanted, badly, and they would tear her and the other survivors apart to get it. Ralph looked down at Max, meeting the warhound's steely gaze. This was it, the moment of truth. They had to save those people, had to stop Niran. The fate of New Columbus, maybe all of humanity, hung in the balance. Taking a deep breath, Ralph readied his weapon. Max bared his fangs in a silent snarl. Together they prepared to face the nightmare ahead. Ralph knew the odds were against them, knew this could be their last stand, but he also knew he had to try. For the survivors, for the UEA, for the future. Ralph's heart pounded as he and Max crept closer to the research facility, their footsteps muffled by the rubble and debris littering the ground. The eerie silence was broken only by the occasional distant explosion or the skittering of small creatures among the ruins. As they approached the building, Ralph spotted a group of Voth warriors standing guard at the entrance, their pulse rifles held at the ready. He knew they couldn't risk a direct confrontation. They were outnumbered, and the sound of gunfire would only attract more Voth to their location. Ralph's mind raced as he tried to come up with a plan. Suddenly, an idea struck him. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small spherical device, a holographic projector. With a few quick taps on the device's control panel, Ralph programmed it to create a lifelike image of a human soldier. He took a deep breath and launched the hologram, sending it running across the open ground in front of the facility. The Voth guards immediately snapped to attention, their weapons trained on the flickering figure. They opened fire, plasma bolts sizzling through the air and passing harmlessly through the hologram. Seizing the opportunity, Ralph and Max darted forward, slipping through the entrance and into the building's shadowy interior. The corridors were dimly lit, the emergency lighting casting an eerie red glow over the cracked and crumbling walls. Ralph strained his ears, trying to pick up any sound that might lead them to Niran and the survivors. As they crept deeper into the facility, a muffled cry of pain echoed through the halls. Ralph's blood ran cold. He recognized that voice. It was Dr. Sorensen. He and Max quickened their pace, navigating the twisting corridors until they reached a large central chamber. Ralph peered around the corner, his heart nearly stopping at the sight before him. Niran stood over Dr. Sorensen, who was strapped to a chair, her face contorted in agony. The Voth commander held a menacing-looking device in his hand, which Ralph recognized as a neural extractor. The device was designed to forcibly remove information from a subject's mind, and Niran was using it on Dr. Sorensen. In the corner, the other survivors huddled together, their faces etched with fear. Several Voth warriors stood guard over them, their weapons trained on the terrified humans. Ralph's mind raced as he tried to formulate a plan. They had to save Dr. Sorensen and the others, but they were heavily outnumbered. He glanced down at Max, who crouched low beside him, his muscles tensed and ready to spring into action. The warhound's eyes met Ralph's, a silent understanding passing between them. They had been through countless battles together, and they both knew the stakes. Ralph took a deep breath, his grip tightening on his pulse rifle. He knew that the next few moments would be critical. One wrong move could cost him not only his own life, but the lives of the survivors and the valuable information locked in Dr. Sorensen's mind. The fate of New Columbus and perhaps all of humanity hung in the balance. Ralph's heart pounded as he crept closer to the Voth guard. EMP grenades clutched tightly in his sweat-slicked hand. The devices were small but powerful, capable of short-circuiting the alien's advanced tech. He glanced back at Max, signaling for the loyal hound to hold position. Max crouched low, coiled like a spring, ready to pounce at Ralph's command. Just as Ralph was about to make his move, an ear-splitting alarm pierced the air. Red lights flashed, bathing the chamber in a hellish glow. The Voth had discovered his ruse. "Defensive positions," Niran barked, his guttural voice echoing off the walls. "Find the intruder." The Voth warriors scrambled, pulse rifles at the ready, scanning the room with cold, merciless eyes. Dr. Sorensen, still strapped to that awful chair, locked gazes with Ralph. Her eyes were wide with fear, silently pleading for help. Ralph knew he had mere seconds before they spotted him. It was now or never. Sucking in a breath, he lobbed an EMP grenade into the center of the room. The device detonated with a blinding flash, a shockwave of electromagnetic energy rippling outward. The Voth's weapons sparked and fizzled, rendered useless. But Niran stood tall, unfazed. His armor had been shielded against such attacks. Niran's head snapped towards Ralph, eyes narrowing with pure malice. "There you are!" Ralph charged, a battle cry tearing from his throat. Max leapt out from behind him with a ferocious snarl. The warhound lunged at the nearest Voth, powerful jaws clamping down on the alien's throat, razor-sharp teeth tearing through tough, leathery hide. Ralph and Niran clashed in a brutal dance of combat, augmented fists and hardened Voth claws slashing and striking. Ralph ducked a vicious swipe, countering with a swift uppercut. Niran staggered back, then retaliated with a flurry of blows that Ralph barely managed to block. As they fought, Ralph caught glimpses of Dr. Sorensen struggling against her bonds. The cruel neural extractor still latched to her head like a metallic parasite. He had to get that thing off her before it ripped the secrets from her mind. But Niran was relentless, a whirlwind of deadly precision. Ralph's muscles burned with exertion, his heart jackhammering in his chest. He landed a solid punch to Niran's jaw, but the Voth hardly seemed to feel it. Max yelped in pain as a Voth warrior kicked him off, the hound skidding across the floor. Ralph risked a glance at his faithful companion, watching in horror as Max struggled to stand, blood matting his fur. Dr. Sorensen cried out, her voice raw with agony. The neural extractor hummed and whirred, delving deeper into her mind, violating her very thoughts. Ralph gritted his teeth, desperation fueling his aching limbs. He had to end this, had to save her, had to stop Niran. The fate of the survivors, of the entire human race, depended on it. But Niran was a force of nature, an unstoppable juggernaut of sinew and rage. And as their battle raged on, Ralph began to fear that even he might not be enough to stop the Voth commander's relentless onslaught. The neural extractor continued to whine, seconds ticking away like a countdown to damnation. Ralph panted, sweat and blood dripping into his eyes, blurring his vision. Niran loomed before him, a nightmare made flesh. In that moment Ralph knew true terror, the icy realization that he might fail, that all might be lost, but he pushed back against the fear, steeling himself for the fight to come. He would not give up. Not now. Not ever. He lunged at Niran once more, a primal roar echoing through the chamber. And as they clashed again in a storm of desperate fury, Ralph could only pray that somehow, against all odds, he would find a way to triumph over the darkness that threatened to engulf them all. The clash of titans raged on, Ralph and Niran trading blows in a deadly dance. Across the chamber, Max became a whirlwind of fur and fury, leaping from one Voth warrior to the next. The enhanced warhound moved with blinding speed, ripping into leathery flesh with razor fangs. Voth fell before him, their weapons clattering to the ground. Ralph felt a surge of hope as he saw Max buying him precious seconds. He redoubled his efforts, augmented muscles straining as he battered Niran's defenses. The Voth commander was a formidable foe, but Ralph could see the first flickers of uncertainty in those cold reptilian eyes. With a roar of defiance, Ralph unleashed a devastating uppercut, catching Niran square on the jaw. The Voth staggered back, his head snapping to the side. Ralph seized the opening, charging forward and slamming into Niran with the force of a freight train. They crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs. Ralph didn't hesitate. He scrambled to his feet and sprinted towards Dr. Sorensen, his heart pounding in his ears. She thrashed against her bonds, the neural extractor still pulsing with malevolent energy. Ralph's fingers flew over the device, his mind racing as he tried to decipher the alien controls. "Hold on, Doc," he muttered through gritted teeth. "I'm going to get you out of this." Behind him he heard Niran roar with rage. The Voth was back on his feet, murder in his eyes. But Max was there, leaping between them with a snarl of defiance. The warhound and the Voth clashed in a blur of slashing claws and snapping jaws. Ralph worked feverishly, sweat dripping into his eyes. Finally, with a hiss of released pressure, the neural extractor disengaged. Dr. Sorensen slumped forward, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Ralph caught her, supporting her weight as he tore the restraints away. A yelp of pain cut through the chaos. Ralph's head snapped around, his blood turning to ice in his veins. Niran stood over Max's limp form, the warhound's neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Ralph's friend, his loyal companion, lay still and lifeless on the cold metal floor. Grief and rage surged through Ralph like a tidal wave. He let out a wordless howl of anguish, his vision turning red. He charged at Niran, all thought of strategy or self-preservation forgotten. The Voth met him head-on, and they clashed in a storm of primal fury. Dimly, Ralph was aware of Dr. Sorensen freeing the other survivors, urging them towards the exit. But his world had narrowed to the monster before him, the creature who had taken his best friend. They traded blows with mind-numbing force, Ralph's armor sparking and denting under the onslaught. But he barely felt the impacts. All he could see was Max's broken body. All he could feel was the all-consuming need for vengeance. And then, in a moment of crystalline clarity, Ralph saw his chance. Niran overextended, his guard dropping for the briefest of instants. Ralph lunged forward, his hand closing around the Voth's throat. His other hand scrabbled at his armor, fingers finding the hidden switch. Niran's eyes widened in sudden understanding. He thrashed and bucked, trying to break free. But Ralph held on with the strength of madness, the strength of a man with nothing left to lose. The self-destruct countdown blinked to life on Ralph's HUD. 3 seconds, 2, 1. The world vanished in a blinding flash of light and heat. The explosion ripped through the facility, consuming metal and flesh alike. Ralph felt a moment of searing agony, and then nothing. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.